Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Zakor. I'm proud to be a teacher at Uplift Community High School and one of the co-founders of the school. Thanks. We're really just like so excited and so honored to have you guys at our school. It's just really wonderful to see the space filled with so many people who are dedicated to a better educational future for our young people. So in keeping with the discussions we've been having about building community and community struggle, we thought that we should tell you some things about Uplift's history, because really it came about thanks to a history of struggle in this community uptown. Sorry, I'm going to use my notes more than I might, because I've been going to workshops like you guys, and they gave us a strict time deadline, so it'll help me go faster. So at Uplift, we teach our students that the school exists in part thank you to the Black Panther Party. And we teach them that because there really is a history of connection from the people who started our school and helped our school become what it is with the party. It started back in the 60s and 70s, so when the party was doing its wonderful work, a number of young progressive white people went to various party offices to say, what can we do? How can we help? And they were told, go and organize your own people. So a number of those young people found their way to Uptown, which at that time was a diverse community, but still primarily low-income families from the Appalachian area where they'd been displaced from. And those young people formed an organization called the ISC, or the Intercommunal Survival Committee, which was loosely affiliated with the Black Panther Party and modeled its work on the party. So it began to run survival programs, Survival Pending Revolution. And those programs included things like tenants' rights programs, health programs, youth activities and recreation, and of course education programs. Because as we all know, you can't work on just one thing because everything is all connected. So in the early 90s, a group of young people who had come up through these various programs decided that they could run some of the programs themselves and probably do it better. They're very like the talented young people that we're seeing at this conference, as a matter of fact. So a round of applause for those wonderful young people at the conference. So they started running first recreation programs, but then they developed a summer educational enrichment program called Youth on Youth. It was housed at the Uplift building, which was then Arai Middle School, and it was a program for middle school students, but it was run by college students from the community who had experienced goods and bads of education and developed a program that combined not only exciting educational ideas, but recreational and team building activities as well. So some of the young people that were running the Youth on Youth program, which existed for about 10 or 12 years, they were inspired by the program to become teachers so that they could find a way to give back to their community. And at about the same time, some of the older ISC members, including myself, became teachers as well. In 2003 of us, so John Yolich and Shor Ng, who are from Uptown and were part of the Youth on Youth Collective, and myself started teaching together at Joan Arai Middle School. We were on a team together. We developed our own social justice-based curriculum. We had great relationships with our students. We were getting good test scores. And then in 2003, the Board of Education began its Renaissance 2010 program and decided to close Arai in the first group of schools that were designated to be closed. So why a school like Arai if it was doing well? Well, it was because the board wanted to put the military academy, Rickover, in the Arai building. Thankfully, we have an organized community in Uptown, and we had elected our own former ISC member, Helen Schiller, as the alderman, and she said no military school under any circumstances. So sorry, Sen, you got it. So that meant that the Arai building was kind of up for grabs, and whatever group could write a proposal that would be accepted by the Community Advisory Council that would be making the decision would get the building. So because the three of us had this activist background, we'd been involved in the community struggles for more than 20 years at that point. Because we knew we had community support and because we knew we couldn't let a charter school come into our community, John Shore and I decided that we would write a proposal for something to come into the Arai building. And the community had long wanted a high school there, so we wrote a proposal for a middle school and a high school called Uplift, with the 3 pillars that you have seen in our kiva and on the front of our building, which are being college prep, being connected to the community, and having a social justice mission. So the board tried to engage in some underhanded trickery, as they always do, because they wanted Perspectives Charter School to be in the building. But in the end, our proposal won out, and we got the building. But the struggle's never over, as we all know. And just because you say you have a social justice school doesn't mean it really is one. So to talk about that aspect is my colleague, Syria.
Hey, everybody. My name is Syriac. I don't have the same history of community struggle as Karen. I was a first-year teacher when Uplift first opened in 2005, so I've kind of grown up with the school. And just like she said, it was a struggle to get the school and to actually exist as a social justice school. But our struggle to actually be a social justice school is ongoing, right? It's one thing to call yourself a social justice school. Another thing to actually live it out on a daily basis and actually live up to that ideal. For a lot of reasons, that's been a challenge for us. And one of the challenges we found is that we don't all of the people in the building have an agreement on what social justice is, right? Even in this space right here, I'm sure we have a varying range of ideas of what social justice is or what social justice education should be. And so you can imagine the general teaching population, it's even a wider opinion, right? And so it's hard to live out social justice if no one agrees on what that is. So that was a challenge. Another challenge is that as a public school, like all public schools, we face a lot of pressure for standardized test scores and other metrics that the board uses to decide whether or not you get to exist as a school and on what terms you get to exist. And surprise, surprise, social justice is not on that list of metrics. And so when we're under pressure for test scores and other stuff, it's easy for social justice to get pushed to the background. All right. So with those two challenges, those of us really committed to social justice at Uplift, back in 2006, we formed a social justice inquiry group modeled after the work of Jeff Duncan Andrade, who had actually come out to visit Uplift in 2005 when we first opened. And so for 7 years, we've had this inquiry group at Uplift of Uplift teachers to act as support for each other as social justice teachers, to develop our own critical consciousness as educators so that we can do a better job in the classroom, and also to push social justice forward in the school. And through our work in the inquiry group, we found it necessary and important and useful to come to some agreement on some ideas and terms. And so we've come to a definition of social justice right now, and these are all working definitions, but we define social justice as the collective struggle against oppression for freedom and equality, and that's something that we teach and that the students are familiar with. We also kind of define our goal for social justice teaching, and it's a little longer, so I'm gonna have to read it to you. But it's to help our students acquire the skills, develop the analytical tools, and attain the disposition and concrete practice to become leaders in the struggle to transform the world into one of greater justice. So those are some kind of goals we set for ourselves in terms of what we're supposed to be as a school and what we're supposed to be doing in our classrooms. And so with those common understanding and definitions, we've used those as a base to kind of push social justice forward in the school. And so the two things that we do that kind of make us unique is that we begin every school year with a school-wide opening unit connected to social justice, so that every student in every classroom for the first week or 2 weeks of school is looking at the same theme through different lenses of different subject areas. So for example, last year's opening unit theme was, how can my learning change the world? And so they approach that theme in science, math, English, social studies, music, art. Every class tackles that theme, right? So it's a really powerful way to begin the school year and really sets kind of a norm of social justice in the school. A second thing we do is towards the middle of the school year, we have a social justice expo where we showcase student work related to social justice both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. It's a community event, and it's just as much to show other people what we're doing, but also it's for us to reaffirm our identity as a social justice school, because it takes day-to-day work to live up to that. It's not automatic. Like, I know you've been in the building and you've seen the amazing artwork there, right? And that's wonderful to have that stuff. It's wonderful to have a social justice school, but it's a fight every day to live up to that. We just want to make sure you understand that. So those are just some of the things happening at Uplift that we wanted you to know about. And again, like Karen said, we're really honored to have you in our building, and we're hoping that all this beautiful social justice energy you all are bringing can kind of permeate the walls and help us in our mission of social justice. So thanks.
Thank you, both of you, for opening up your homes, or your second home. So, one last thank you about space. We are in the People's Church. It's a congregation that is part of both banners here, right? The United Church of Christ and Unitarian Universalist. It's a one congregation that's jointly observe those practices. Pastor Jean is upstairs right now in her second floor office, so I thought we could actually do a big joint thank you, Pastor Jean, that she might be able to hear, right? Because, there's some doors in the second area, so we might get to her. So on 3, we're just going to do a big thank you, Pastor Jean, like, right? I'm not getting enough nods. Can I get some more nods on that? Okay. All right, so ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Pastor Jean! All right. Let's give her a round of applause and give this space a round of applause. Thank you. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the structure for our next hour in, I said 2 hours, about 15 minutes ago, hour 45. And we're gonna do an experiment with not an experiment like the kind of education reform we're all experiencing, but an experiment in here today around how to kind of flatten and democratize a plenary session where we have some honored guests, but also very honored participants, all of you. So I'm gonna explain a little of that. First, I want to know, and this will make sense in a minute, who's in the room? And so I'm just gonna shout out some cities, some areas, some states, some things, and make some noise. So where is the West Coast? Oh man. Wow, they walk slow, so maybe they're still coming. Where is the East Coast? Oh, wow. All right, how about no coast? All right. South? All right. Mountain time. All right. Yes. Okay. There's more. So I know there's some. We'll do this. We'll do this in joint just because I know they're here. Pittsburgh, Philly, Pittsburgh, Philly, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. No, because they're not giving enough money right now. Shh. Harrisburg needs to come through with some money before we get, but if you're from Harrisburg, we love you. New England. All right, those are my people. Chicago. Chi-Town. When I grew up, I always thought Chi-Town meant Chinatown because I'm half Chinese, so I was like, oh, Chi-Town. But Chi-Town. All right. Thank you. So, one of the things that we're going to explore together from, actually, you know what? Because I know there was a brother from Halifax here. So, Canada? Yeah, nice. All right. Well, yeah, I just knew there was definitely Canada. I knew I could get a response from that. Can you shout out? Because I don't want to hear like a silence because I don't know. Folks from other nations, aside from the United States and Canada, anyone want to shout that out for now? Anybody? Thank you, Canada, for making this an international conference. Thank you. So we are excited to all be here. And I know that because of the energy. Last year, 2 years ago in Providence, when I stood in front of the room and looked out, it's just a beautiful collection of people. And the things and the conversations and the workshops that we're all part of are all part of that beauty. And so we all just need to recognize that and keep on reflecting on that. We're all here from all these different places because we all share some common visions and we are all engaged in some common struggle. And that's what we want to talk about today. That's why we have panelists from different places across the country. We have panelists. I didn't shout out Arizona. I did. I know. Yeah. I don't know. Well, you guys are on Mountain Time, aren't you? Yeah. So, but we have panelists from Arizona. We have a panelist from here in Chicago. We have a panelist from New Orleans. We have a panelist from Philly. And part of doing that is to talk about and think about the commonalities that we have and the struggles that we face. But we also want to talk about the kinds of things that we are struggling with within our communities, within our movement. And so today we want to talk about some of that, and the panelists will get more into it. We're going to have a structure where it goes like this. There are 3 parts. So the first part is going to be a panel discussion with the 4 panelists, and Patricia is going to moderate the opening discussion, and they're going to set the stage. And we're going to put out some questions, but what I want you to keep in mind is this 3-part framework. So there's what, there's so what, and there's, does anyone know this framework? Now what, right? The panelists are going to help us think about the first 2 from their experiences and from their perspectives in the respective cities that they're representing and the places that they come from. The what are they facing? What are the challenges in our communities or in their communities? And so what? Why does that matter? What do they think about it? What's their analysis? That's the analysis. We do a lot of analysis in this movement. We need to know what is happening. We need to know so what about that, right? Then we're going to actually go into part 2 of our agenda, which is actually going to be turning the floor over to sort of impromptu, turn to your conglomerate over here or whatever, turn to your group, and we're going to have small group discussions for a bit and pose some questions for you all to think about in the audience that are really reflecting back and thinking about what gets shared in the first half. That's the now what, because I think G2 said yesterday, we're all here, he said, not to think about if we're going to work together, but how we are going to work together. He said that up on this stage yesterday. And Tara also, when Tara Mack was up here, she said that we are FMFP, right? You are FMFP. We're all FMFP. It's not about who's standing here with this mic. It's about everyone in this conference. And so in that portion of this evening or this afternoon, we want you to have some small group discussions around the now what question. We'll get what and so what on the table. Now what is coming from us. And then the last part of our conversation and time together is going to be back up here on the stage. We're going to add 4 additional chairs up here, and we're going to invite representatives from the different small group conversations to join and to think about, so think about this when you're in your small groups, but to join the panelists up on stage and to have a conversation that continues what we heard in the beginning and shares and adds to that for the rest of the room some of the thoughts and ideas and perspectives that were shared in your small group, right? So this is a little bit complicated in a space like this with this many people. So we are doing this with the faith that our commitment to this work is going to make that happen. And I'm excited to be part of that. So we'll go over this briefly again when the time is right for each session, but I just wanted to give that broad overview right now. And I am going to stop talking and invite Patricia to the stage to get things kicked off.
Thank you, Keith. All right, I do not want to take any more time up. I really want us to jump right into our planned conversations for today. So I will be right now introducing our panelists and bring them to stage. So first one up, please, Sharon Snyder from Philadelphia. Sharon is a youth organizer with the Philadelphia Student Union. So have a seat, please. That's right. All right, next one up is Sean Arce from Arizona, please. Come and join us. Sean is a teacher and consultant with the Chicano Institute for Teaching and Organizing. All right, Karen Harper Royale, please join the stage from New Orleans. Karen is a public school parent and an education advocate. Karen works with several organizations around different issues of educational justice. Thanks, Karen, for joining us. All right. And then we have Karen Lewis from Chicago. Please join the stage. Karen is the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. And I'll be filling the last seat. Where do you want to sit, Karen? Wherever you want. So we'll be passing this mic around. So I'm just going to leave it here. We'll have to just share it. Right now. Can you hold it just anytime? Thank you. Just pass it. Thanks, Joe. All right, let's get started. I am ready for my first question, and I'm really excited to hear from you. So, just for all of us to get to know you a little bit better and how you and your work connect to all of our lives and our organizing energies, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the different educational issues that you are facing in your community, with your community, in your community-based work? Whoever wants to start.
Great. I'll start since I'm right by the mic. Well, as a public school parent, a parent of a child with a disability, and as well as a graduate who also had a disability, what we're facing in New Orleans is the total takeover of our public schools, near total takeover of public schools by the state, and they place most of our schools in the Recovery School District. I work directly with parents of children with disabilities, and these changes that have been made in our school system have been characterized as reform. I don't call them reform, but some people call them reform. And what we find is that most of our children with special needs, whether they're identified or not, end up falling through the cracks because the people who privatize our public schools want to pretend that choice is all that matters. And what ends up happening is that our children whose needs are greater, those children, they end up moving from school to school to school. So in many ways, it's really the schools that are choosing when they choose not to serve our kids who have greater needs. When you have a greater need, you become a liability to many of these schools. So as I try to help the parents, including myself, because my son is caught up in this mess, we found that the whole reform is the problem. What they're calling reform really is the problem, and so we have to collaborate with many other people throughout the city to try to bring attention to this. Over 90% of our schools in New Orleans are privatized as charter schools, and the state has additionally given out vouchers to many more parents so that they could exit the public school system. So in doing this, it's leaving the few direct run public schools with the children with the greatest need. And that's further eroding the quality of education that our children are getting. So we've worked together with other local community groups, parents, community groups on a statewide level, national level. I'm a part of the Journey for Justice movement. And we know that because of the magnitude of what's going on in New Orleans, it's going to take a while to turn that around. But, you know, I have hope and faith that with working together, we're going to turn it around. But we also know that our stories are very important. And many of us travel around and we tell the stories of the truth of what's going on in New Orleans, because as New Orleans is being promoted as a model of education reform, we know that they can't argue with the truth of what we are going through as parents. So telling our stories, telling your stories, because Chicago's in the middle of this, Philly, many of our urban cities are in the throes of what they call reform. Telling our stories will help to win over the hearts of the masses of people who might otherwise believe the propaganda. And in telling our stories, we can't depend on the corporate media to tell our stories for us. We have to use every alternative form of media that we can find to tell the truth about how these schools are not helping our kids. So here we are 8 years later, and in New Orleans, 100% of the schools that are run directly by the state are rated as an F, actually. 100% of the ones that remain under state control as direct run schools are rated as F. And 79% of those brand new, shiny new charter schools they created within the Recovery School District are rated as D or F. So if privatizing schools actually worked, to improve the quality of public education, you should see it in New Orleans, because there's no teachers union to deal with, there's no school board to deal with, they have free reign to do whatever they want. You would see the success in New Orleans because they've had 8 years to implement it, and the results I just told you about don't indicate success to me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to tell you what's going on in Philly. Well, the governor cut $1 billion from education, and that left Philly in a $300 million budget crisis. So, because of the budget crisis, the students, teachers, and parents all came together, and they rallied, they marched, and we tried to convince the SRC to keep the schools open. The SRC is School Reform Commission. They are the people that vote on the school closings. And so because of that, we saved 7 schools, but they still closed down 23, sadly. With the $300 million budget crisis, hold on. That cut nurses, counselors, sports, assistant principals, art classes, and other things. Other things. We had 3 walkouts, and each walkout got bigger. The last walkout, we had over 5,000 students walk out of school, and we got so many students to walk out because we made a hashtag called Walkout215. 215 is Philadelphia's area code, and we put it up on Facebook. We told people to tell their friends. We made flyers, put them around the school, and the walkout just became a big success. Students and teachers need to come together because we are the ones that are going to be affected the most because we're the ones that's going to be in school. That's pretty much everything.
Check. Okay. Yeah, we have a very similar context in the state of Arizona. Not really a heavily populated state. Nonetheless, we have the largest number of charter schools in the union. So we have some interesting things going on in Arizona with the anti-immigrant movement. It's pretty much the epicenter of hate in this country. So in dealing with education within that context, it really affects our communities. It affects definitely the education system, wherein we have it's legal now to racially profile our communities, specifically Mexicano, Chicano, Latino communities in Arizona. So within that context, it directly affects education. And immediately following SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law, we had HB 2281, where we were so fortunate to have a program that was actually responsive to our community's needs. We had an ethnic studies program, specifically a Mexican American studies program, that was meeting the educational needs, the academic needs, the emotional needs, the social needs of our community. And that was such a threat to the state of Arizona. Heaven forbid we have, children that are loving to read, children that are loving themselves, our community, that are not ashamed of their parents, because too often our schools, institutions, really force us to think that way. So as a result, the state was so threatened by this demographic. Again, going back to 1070, We have Latinos being the fastest growing demographic in the country. The state of Arizona decided to really put a clamp on that, and really, rather than see this demographic shift as something positive, something that we can embrace, something that we could utilize in our schools, utilize the strengths that Latino children bring into our schools, they perceive it as a threat. And my brother Curtis Acosta, the way he framed it, it's we really shouldn't perceive this as a threat. It's really a healing of the continent. Looking at this demographic shift within a historical context, those are some beautiful words. So with that, our communities are continuing to struggle, continuing to mobilize, continuing to assert our humanity and conduct this work, albeit outside of the school system. We're coming up and creating alternative spaces through some organizing efforts, through some education efforts, and continuing to inform and be responsive to our communities. Be responsive in that, asking our parents, asking our elders, asking the children, particularly the youth, how we can continue the struggle and provide an equitable and a meaningful educational experience for them. Thank you.
Well, if I may, I'd like to speak into the context of what we're all hearing, because I think it's important to continue to connect the dots. So what I am hearing is exactly what's going on here in Illinois, which is an actual starving of public education. In Illinois, we do not have a progressive income tax. We have a very regressive flat tax. This is what stokes the problem. So, of course, schools then are funded by the real estate taxes. So if you live in places where real estate is high, your taxes are relatively high, and then your schools are also relatively good because they're appropriately resourced. So what we're hearing across the table here are two things. One is that there is a definite attack on public education because the very notion of the word public is now under attack. So all public institutions now are bad, that the government is bad, and that what will help everything are private schools. So if you listen to the literature of the people who speak in their echo chamber, I realize we're in another one, but those that speak in that other, I would like to call the crazy echo chamber, their conversation is government schools. That's how they even refer to public education. They don't even call it public education. It's about reframing. So what we see here also is this connection between schools and the notion of punishment and public humiliation. So what we also have is this nomenclature running throughout this country that teachers are bad. The problem with public education is bad teachers. If we can get rid of bad teachers, and the impediment to bad teachers, of course, is the bad union. However, in states of the South where there are no unions, interestingly enough, why then are they not at the top of the metric system? So you cannot blame unions for things they absolutely have nothing to do. However, what I have learned, if I've learned nothing else in this business, is that truth and justice have no meaning. What we have been taught is truth and justice for them can be propagandized and spun into something else. So in Chicago, clearly those of you all that have been paying any attention know that we suffer from a lack of democracy. We do not have an elected representative school board. That absolutely has to happen. So that who are accountable to the community from which they come. Our problem right now is that the people who are making the decisions about Chicago public schools are extremely wealthy, disconnected, vulture philanthropists. Vultures. And, you know, they hate me so much, it's funny, you know. So I must be doing something right. So what we are focusing on and what we have to be able to do is to nullify the amount of space the wealthy in this country are taking up. And we can do that because there are more of us. I don't care how much money they still have one vote. They still have one opportunity. The only thing we can do is to reclaim our democracy. And most of us are so disgusted because we have actually given it up, abrogated our responsibility, and allowed people who do not represent us to continually run. So we have two branches of the same money party making all the decisions in this country. So what I would hope is that every person in here become politically active in your community. You need to run for school board. You need to run for state reps. You need to be the state senators. You need to be the governors, and you need to be the president of the United States, and not these plutocrats who are in the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. I'd like us to spend a little bit more time on revisiting some of the specific strategies or tactics, perhaps, that you have used with your comrades, with your colleagues, with young people, their parents, and their communities in all of your organizing work in addressing educational injustice, right? So could you maybe share with us, speak openly about what have been some of the factors that you have grabbed and applied to your action plans with the communities that you've been working with? Is that clear, the question?
Yeah, I just get it.
Okay. No, I understand. So, all right, think about strategies, those of you who can speak about it, right? Thank you.
Well, one of the things that we're doing I work with several groups in New Orleans, and one of the groups is called the New Orleans Education Equity Roundtable. And we have produced a telephone number that goes to a message line. So people can call us and tell us what they're experiencing in their schools and how much involvement they want in that. Whether that's they just want it exposed. We have a number of reporters that often contact us for leads on stories, or if they want us to videotape, most of the time it's parents, videotape their experience, and we're putting together a website to be able to put that out there, because as New Orleans is being touted as a model of reform, we know that nobody can argue with the truth of what a parent is going through as their child tries to get an education in a system that looks like what happens in New Orleans. And we were even able to, this is a global movement. I just want to make sure that everybody don't think it's just happening to them in their town. I was asked to speak in New Zealand and Australia, and these things are happening there. And we were able to get 3 parents' stories on major television in New Zealand. And those parents, it was about a 10-minute piece in New Zealand, and the stories were there because Christchurch, New Zealand experienced an earthquake. And just as the disaster capitalism came into New Orleans to take over after our hurricane, they're trying to close schools in Christchurch, New Zealand, and open up charter schools. So we know that the storytelling is a tactic or a strategy to tell the truth about what this looks like once it gets underway.
We have meetings on Saturday. It's called citywide meetings. We meet with all the students, and we go over things that can help make schools better, and we let the students share their ideas, and we come up with things. We go to walkouts, protests. We go to all the meetings at the School District of Philadelphia. Yeah, that's what we do.
So Sharon, I do know that you recently traveled to Chicago, right? And you participated against, the massive school closures. That's huge. The fact that you're traveling to be here in Chicago, adding your body to the many other bodies on the forefront, right? It's huge, right? Go, Sharon. That's what do you think? What kind of thought was behind that? You coming to Chicago?
Well, I was nervous because that's going to be my first time on an airplane. It was my first time. I was scared. I was so scared, but at the end of the day, I was so happy I came. It was hot. It was really hot out there. It was a lot of marching, but it was a nice place to be. Chicago is a nice place. I would like to come again. And I just felt like I did something, and I felt like someone heard my voice when I came to Chicago. And yeah, so very good.
Yeah, within our context, within Arizona, I think it's the first piece is critical to raise that consciousness there in Arizona and to spread that consciousness. We have the private prison industry in Arizona, which is devastating our communities, and it is of no coincidence that we have the increase in the private prison industry and the mass reduction in public education funding, where we have Latinos becoming the majority population in Arizona's public schools. So again, I think it's real critical to communicate to each other and raise that consciousness. And we're very thankful in Arizona a couple years ago. We really had multiple national convergences when SB 1070 came out, and accompanying that SB 1070 was the Anti-Mexican American Studies law. So we've been fortunate to develop and strengthen that solidarity with folks from throughout the country. But that consciousness, and then a real solid analysis of the situation and where do we go from here, because too often it's very difficult when our communities are really under siege in many ways. Our children's parents are being taken away, totally devastating our communities. We're being pushed into the prison industry. So what do we do now? And that is our primary focus is through education, through supporting each other, through there's a lot of trauma that is taking place in our communities, living right there on the frontera, along the border. So those are our realities, and those are the realities that our children face, that the trauma that they bring into the school every day. So we as teachers need to be responsive and respectful of those needs, and really provide some safe spaces for them. And we do that through a responsive educational model.
So one of the first things the Chicago Teachers Union did was to reorganize the pay structure of its officers and its management so that we would take the same scale as regular rank and file teachers. That's number one. In doing so, we were able to hire an organizing department. And the organizing department was about internal organizing. It was not about external organizing. So it was about internally organizing our members into understanding what our collective power really was and what it looked like. And the second thing we did was we have a research department. So it is extremely important that when people get up with PowerPoint presentations and look very, very smart and very accomplished and very efficient, that you have real data to combat that. So you cannot just go and say, I'm passionate about this and I care about that. While that's all true, you have to be able to translate that appropriately so that you start having other people think about how they query the lies. So all of a sudden, the mainstream media in Chicago is starting to look at stories they never looked at before. They're starting to unpack. We had a huge, giant front page story about a very corrupt charter school operator here in Chicago. That research was not done just by that reporter. I'm just saying. We don't know how they got that information. But all of a sudden, things are starting to change. So questions get asked that were never asked before. So we have a mayor that doesn't believe in democracy, and none of his friends do. So forcing these kinds of questions to be asked so that they are the ones that have to explain their ridiculousness. So when they come up with a lie, so they started, for example, when the mayor was running for office, he had this lie that he'd said that children in Chicago lose 4 years of schooling compared to children in Houston because of we have the shortest school day in the history of the world. So when we actually pulled up real data and started dealing with that, and as a matter of fact, Joan Edelman of Stand On Children said, we made it up. He actually said they made that up. So these people have no morals, they have no integrity, they have no honesty, but the average person in America does. So they don't take very kindly to being lied to and being propagandized and marketed to, because that's exactly what the privatization, the charter school movement is about. So what we have been able to do is take those big issues, start unpacking them, and attack them with logic and reasoning, which, as I like to say, is kryptonite to crazy. You take your logic and your reasoning, you pull that out, and you have that information at your fingertips. The other thing that I think is extraordinarily important is that everybody in the organization needs to be on message. You need to be on message. You may have some interest in something else, but if it doesn't further your goals, then you need to put that on the back burner for a while and work and continue to work with people that understand that. We believe that parents, educators, students, and the community knows what's best for their community. People who are so distanced from that can only reduce your community to a spreadsheet. Our communities are not spreadsheets, and we should not ever allow ourselves to be treated as such.
We have 5 more minutes for this part of our conversation this afternoon, and I'd like maybe a couple of you, so those, if you wish to speak to it, but I'd like us to think about, or complicate perhaps, what does it mean when we are able to say, we reached this point, us, all of us, collectively built this movement, we fought the opposition. So the us, the we, how did we get there, especially when we have tension, perhaps even opposition in our own movements, right? In our own organizations, in our own networks. How do we sort of, I don't want to say dismantle, but it's part of the dismantling work, but how do we sort of connect and default our doing and thinking that we're truly, truly aligned and on the same pages?
I want to go back to what I think is a pivotal moment in labor history in the United States, and that is September of 2012. And for those of you that do not know what that was, it was the Chicago Teachers Union strike. And I want to explain why that was important, because it was not just people didn't go to work. And I think people do not understand that that was a 1.5 year preparation of people organizing conversations, building by building. So in places where people hated each other, there were divisions in the faculty and divisions amongst, you have to start out with one galvanizing moment. And for us, it was a contract campaign. So we asked people to first look at what their self-interests were, and then to spread that out. So you could ask for what's best for your children. So that took on a completely different idea, because some people might want, I want a 20% raise, but somebody else wants, I need another social worker to help me out here. So these are the kinds of things where people were coming from very different points of view, but they were sitting around working together in contract committees in every single building. Again, building by building. So when you start small, then that spreads out. But you have to have a very strong core of people that you are supporting with this kind of information and with this kind of focus. Because it is easy for us to sit around and talk about what we don't like and what they're doing to us and blah, blah, blah. But it's the other thing to come up. What are the action steps? So the action steps were something very simple. You have to have things that you can see some results from. And for us, it was wear red shirts on Friday. That's not a hard ask. But you know what? We had people call us and say, the principal said that that's a gang color. And I said, nobody is thinking you're a member of a gang. You're a 40-year-old, gray hair. Nobody's worried about you being in a gang. Wear red on Friday. I'm dead serious. There were principals sending out emails to staff to get them to know. What they're trying to do is break your solidarity. And what we're trying to do is that we are solidified on this. We can wear red on Fridays. That was a very powerful organizing tool. It was simple, but it was effective. So that in May, before we even took a strike vote, there were 10,000 red-shirted human beings in downtown city of Chicago. People think you have to have grandiose schemes. No, my sisters and brothers, you start with something accomplishable and something that is obvious to everybody that sees this is a movement. So,
and we'll hear more about this tomorrow in the assembly, but I just wanted to highlight the work with Journey for Justice, where community members and parents and students from over 18 different cities came together around the one issue of school closures and spoke with a collective voice, and we took it to Washington, D.C. twice and had a hearing at the Department of Education, and collectively in our individual cities, but as en masse, we're filing Title VI complaints to address the issues of school closings. There are many, many different aspects of this fake education reform movement, but the issue of school closings is one thing that we could definitely speak with a collective voice on.
Can we have maybe one more comment, Sean or Shran, either one of you?
I think a lot of the good ideas and organizing and the action really comes from the youth. We've seen that in Arizona. They have the courage. They really have the courage. They really have the vision and the heart to continue this work, because you know, these issues in education, these school closures, these effective educational models that the state is taking away from us, you know, directly affects them, their lives. So that's one key thing as educators here. We have to really open up our hearts, our minds, and listen to the youth, listen to the voice of the youth, and they're going to lead us in the right direction.
Thank you. Shran, do you mind if I ask you one last question? Because I mean, Sean just mentioned we're really hoping and turning and leaning on young people like yourself, such as the Philadelphia Student Union. What do you do, for example? How do you reach out and connect with teachers, your very own teachers, right? Who often don't really have any other option but to default to, let's say, punitive discipline practices in schools, right? To keep using suspensions, right? To punish you for so-called misbehavior, et cetera, et cetera. How do you get to work, young people, how do young people get to work with teachers and sort of question what's wrong in schools, right? And how that is tied to a larger educational justice movement.
Well, my teachers in my school, they're understanding. Like, they come to the walkouts and things like that. So, we even have like a teacher that let us have our one of our chapter meetings for PSU on Wednesdays in his class. So like our teachers is real supportive of us. So, and they don't really, our teachers don't like suspending people. So, because they know that we don't. Yeah, they don't really. The teachers I have don't really suspend these students because they know half of us don't even get in trouble when we get suspended, and that's the truth. Because I don't get in trouble. I'm not a bad student, so like I'm a good girl. I don't get in trouble. So like I can't really answer that question because
But you
my
did.
teacher-
You
yeah.
did on so many levels. Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you. It's time to move into our second part of our conversation. We've heard a lot of details. You've made us think a lot, and I think a lot of us are eager now to connect with each other in the room. So Keith, where are you, Keith? Why don't you sort of give us some details what's about to happen, okay? Stay for a second. Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I hope that has some juices flowing in all of your brains. So what we're going to do, and this is the we trust you and your commitment to the process moment. We're going to basically ask you to organically form, just in your seats. We don't need people to move around. But basically, if you think about if these rows were numbered, first row people turn and talk to second row people, 3 turn, 4 to 4, 5 turn. So the odd numbered rows in every other row turn and talk. And what we want you to do before you do that, what we want you to think about together is well, first we want you to do that in groups of what feels comfortable in terms of the turning and talking. So I'm looking out here and I'm thinking, small pods of 6 to 8 folks might work. So if 3 or 4 people turn and talk to 3 or 4 people behind them. But you can figure that out. The balcony is a little more sparse. You all might need to get up and move and talk to each other, not just with like the single person you might be sitting next to. So we're going to talk about a couple questions, and there are people moving about, or there are going to be people moving about to hand them out. And there are these little questions, and I heard Karen ask if we were what the panelists do. We would encourage the panelists to just to move down and join a small group just for this moment, if you'd like. So the questions. This is the now what. We've heard some of the what and the so what. This is the now what. So given the issues that we face in our communities, some that might be the same as what you've heard, some that you might need to explain to your group, and the tensions that we might face within our communities, right, in terms of partnering across organizations, partnering across constituency, partnering across sort of our affinity groups, and you can label those affinity groups in a number of different ways, cross-cultural, cross-role, like teacher, student, parent, parent, community, parent, teacher, parent, student, all of those kinds of identities that we hold. How do we work together? How do we work across those tensions? What do we need to do? What do teachers and communities need to do in order to effectively partner? And what will it take to build solidarity around some common goals and strategies? So those are the guiding questions, but we're moving toward that now what? I think we heard up here, like we need some clear action steps. But we also need to kind of have a little bit of that conversation about that analysis. So, are there any questions? And we're going to do this for about 25 minutes. So that right now, I'm looking at a clock in front of me that says it's 3:35. So we're going to do this until 4 o'clock so that we have about 30 minutes to come back and have some wrap-up conversation where some of you will be joining us up here.